When Jasmine Crockett stood before Congress, she wasn't just facing Melania Trump. She was exposing the theft of $30 million meant to save children with cancer. Money for medicine and hospital beds was siphoned into gowned champagne and glittering lies. Live on national TV, America watched in disbelief as betrayal took center stage. Who dares to rob dying children of their last chance at life? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The United States Congress opened a special hearing broadcast live to the entire nation. The topic was nothing less than explosive: the Save the Children charity auction, which once promised to raise $30 million to help children fighting cancer. What was once hailed as hope had now become a storm of suspicion. Every camera zoomed in, every breath in the chamber seemed to stop as the truth waited to be revealed. Melania Trump entered with icy elegance, her presence commanding attention. She sat down, glanced at Jasmine Crockett, and with a sharp smile delivered her jab. "A small lawyer like you, do you really have the knowledge to question events of international scale?" Her voice dripped with disdain. Her words meant to belittle in front of millions. Jasmine stood slowly, her eyes blazing. "I only need to understand one thing: the money meant to save children with cancer has vanished." The room erupted. The chamber still shook from Jasmine's opening strike, and the audience leaned forward waiting for her next move. Without hesitation, Jasmine pulled out a thick folder and laid it flat on the witness table right under the burning glare of television cameras. She flipped it open with deliberate calm, every page a weapon. The first document stared back in bold print, the financial summary of the Save the Children auction. Jasmine's voice rose sharp and controlled. This event raised $30 million. That number was announced, live, celebrated across headlines, and confirmed by the organizers. She paused, then slammed another page down. But in the official financial report filed later, only $12 million appears. Gas filled the room as the gap in $18 million void hung like a noose in the air. She let the silence throb before she spoke again. $18 million cannot be called a mistake. It cannot be brushed aside as oversight. This is not loose change. This is blood money meant to pay for chemotherapy, hospital beds, and life-saving medicine for children with cancer. The bluntness of her words cracked through the polished veneer of the hearing. Senators shifted uncomfortably, reporters scribbled frantically, and millions watching at home felt a chill crawl across their skin. Every syllable drove home the magnitude of the theft. Across the table, Melania Trump tilted her chin, a faint smile playing on her lips. Her reply came calm but cutting, dripping with practiced disdain. "Perhaps you should take some lessons in accounting. Events of international scale are far more complex than the simple numbers you're playing with." The line wasn't just an answer, it was a calculated insult, an attempt to make Jasmine look small and naive under the floodlights. The camera zoomed on Melania's expression, her smirk daring Jasmine to stumble. Jasmine didn't blink. She leaned forward, eyes hard as stone, and hammered back each word. "Madam, even a first-grade student can see the math. 30 million minus 12 million equals 18 million. And that 18 million should have been sitting in the accounts of children's hospitals, not vanishing into thin air." Her voice sliced through the chamber, clear and merciless. There was no legal jargon, no loophole, only arithmetic, so simple it burned. The audience erupted, some with shocked murmurs, others with cheers that rattled the rafters. To seal her point, Jasmine lifted another set of papers and held them high for the cameras. "Here is the printout from the official auction system dated January 25, 2025. Every item, every winning bid, every verified payment. From the diamond necklace sold for $450,000 to the signed art piece that fetched $1 million, all the way to the luxury yacht experience that closed at $2.5 million. Add them together and you arrive at the same total every time: $30 million. She let the stack fall with a heavy thud that echoed like a gavel. The hearing chamber boiled over. Senators whispered fiercely to aides. The press gallery went into a frenzy, cameras flashing as if catching fire. On live broadcasts across America, networks broke into bold red banners. "Breaking news: $18 million. Missing from cancer charity auction." Families watching at home clutched their children closer, their hearts pounding with rage and disbelief. The nation now had numbers, dates, and proof staring it in the face, and Jasmine had just turned the hearing into a battlefield. The uproar from Jasmine's math lesson had not yet settled when the chairman called the next witness. The chamber turned silent as Richard Hall, one of the lead organizers of the 2025 Save the Children Gala auction, walked slowly to the microphone. His hands trembled, his voice cracked, but there was steel underneath his fear. Right after the auction night, he began his words echoing across the room. I received direct instructions from Mrs. Trump's office. I was told to break the money into smaller amounts, send it first to a shell company registered in Delaware, then route it offshore to accounts in the Cayman Islands and Monaco. The words hit like a thunderclap, and the cameras zoomed in on Melania's unreadable face. Hall reached into his jacket and handed over a small silver USB drive. This, he said firmly, contains the altered contracts I was ordered to sign. Screens lit up across the chamber as staffers projected the files. The documents once read donation, but were crudely rewritten to say event management fee. The change was obvious, almost insulting in its brazenness. Reporters scribbled furiously, senators muttered to one another, and viewers across America saw the paper trail unravel in real time. Melania finally broke her silence. She let out a sharp laugh, shaking her head. Failures always invent stories to make themselves famous. She sneered, her accent drawing out the sting of each word. The insult hung in the air, meant to paint Hall as nothing more than a desperate man chasing attention. Some in the chamber shifted uncomfortably, but Jasmine leaned forward, her glare cutting across the distance like a blade. The only failure here, Jasmine shot back, her voice hard as steel, is the children with cancer. Children who failed to get their medicine because their money was shipped off to the Cayman Islands. Her words cut through the hearing like gunfire. The gallery erupted with murmurs of shock, and even the chairman struggled to call for order. Jasmine turned toward the cameras, ensuring that every family watching at home heard it clearly. This was not about politics, but about stolen lives. Then she reached for a new stack of papers bound and stamped. Here, she declared, is the bank statement from J.P. Morgan Chase dated February 2025. She held it up for the cameras. The pages showed in black and white 6 separate transfers totaling $18 million, moved out of the inauguration charity account. The money first landed in Delaware Event Services, a company that had no employees, no office, no history. From there, the trail continued to numbered accounts in the Cayman Islands, and finally to a private account in Monaco. The room was stunned by the precision of the details. And then came the final blow. Jasmine pointed to the bottom of the page, her finger tapping the signature line. Authorized by Office of the First Lady. The letters were unmistakable. Melania stiffened, her mask of calm slipping. Her voice snapped sharper now, losing its polish. Do not drag my name into these numbers. I did not sign that, she barked, her tone betraying her nerves. Gasps swept through the audience. This was no longer poise, it was panic. Jasmine lifted the last sheet, enlarged on the screen for millions watching live. The page bore a digital signature, crisp and clear, Melania Trump. If you did not sign, Jasmine said, each word slow and deliberate, then tell this committee who else has the authority to approve with the title of First Lady. Silence followed. No answer came. Senators stared, reporters froze, the nation held its breath. The chamber was electric, the evidence undeniable. And in that moment, the truth stood naked for all to see. This was the smoking gun. The silence after the signature revelation was deafening, but Jasmine was not finished. She reached for another folder, her hands steady, her eyes locked on Melania. We have seen the money move. Jasmine said, her voice echoing through the chamber, but now let's hear it in her own words. Gasps rose from the gallery as staffers projected a new exhibit onto the massive screen behind her. It was an email pulled directly from Melania's private inbox, dated January 21st, 2025, barely 2 hours after the auction had ended. The text appeared in stark black against the white screen's simple but damning, prioritize optics. Redirect large donations to consulting channels for later clearance. Jasmine read it aloud, every syllable striking like a hammer. Prioritize optics, she repeated, letting the words hang heavy. Redirect large donations. The meaning was clear. Appearances came first. Children's lives came last. Senators leaned forward, the press gallery roared to life, and millions watching at home felt their stomachs drop. All eyes turned to Melania. She shifted in her chair, then let out a laugh, low, sharp, mocking. She shook her head, her lips curling into a sneer. You think you can understand the language of the elite, she said coldly. This is how we handle grand events, not the small courthouse games you play. Her words dripped with contempt delivered, as if Jasmine's entire career was beneath her. The camera zoomed closer, capturing the clash of composure and disdain. Jasmine did not blink. She rose slowly, her voice steady and fierce. This is not the language of the elite, she declared, her tone cutting through the chaos. This is the language of embezzlement. The words thundered across the hall, simple and brutal, impossible to misinterpret. She pointed at the screen, the damning email still glowing bright. The timestamp 11:48 p.m. January 21st was circled in red, leaving no room for doubt. The command had come straight from Melania at the exact moment millions believed the money was safe for sick children. The reaction was instant and explosive. Reporters leapt to their feet, shouting questions that echoed off the marble walls. Did you send this email, Mrs. Trump? Who were the consulting channels? Phones buzzed across the chamber as headlines went live. Breaking Melania, Trump email orders, redirect of charity funds. Screens across America lit up with push notifications, families at home staring in disbelief. The revelation was no longer about missing numbers, it was about intent captured in writing. Melania clenched her jaw, her smile faltering under the glare of the cameras. She looked cornered but still tried to cloak herself in superiority. Yet the damage was done. The email was there for all to see, undeniable, undeniable. The chamber pulsed with the knowledge that the truth had been written, sent, and preserved, and Jasmine had just torn the mask away. The chamber still buzzed from the email revelation when Jasmine rose again, her hands steady as she pulled a new stack of papers from her folder. You've seen the numbers. You've seen the signatures. Now, she said firmly, you will see the lies written into contracts. She held the document high, the camera zooming in as the bold letters came into focus. Public Relations Services Agreement, $15 million. Gasps rippled across the hall. Jasmine spread the pages across the table, pointing to the itemized list. According to this contract, $15 million was spent on press conferences, global media campaigns, stage design, and 500 event staff. She let the words hang for a moment. Then her voice dropped like a hammer. But none of these things ever happened. Screens lit up as staffers projected footage from January 2025. There was no international press conference, no massive campaign. The charity auction had been a single glittering evening at a Washington ballroom. Reporters had been present, but only to cover the event itself. There was no global media rollout as the contract claimed. Jasmine's voice sliced through the silence. This contract is not a receipt. It is a fantasy, a cover story to drain $15 million from children's medicine into someone else's pocket. The audience stirred, the weight of the accusation pressing down like lead. To drive the knife deeper, Jasmine called her next witness. Laura Bennett, a former employee of the event company listed on the contract, walked to the microphone. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. Our company provided 20 servers, not 500. 2 sound technicians, not 200. The total cost billed for that night was $198,500. That was it. A murmur ran through the room. The gap between $200,000 and $15 million was too large to ignore. Jasmine placed the verified invoice on the table. The bold figures glared up at the chamber like a scarlet warning, $198,500 USD final payment. Melania shifted in her seat, then let out a short, mocking laugh. Who can remember the number of staff at a party? These tiny details mean nothing, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Cameras zoomed in on her smile, but the tension in her jaw betrayed the crack in her armor. Jasmine seized the moment. She leaned into the microphone, her tone fierce. Tiny details, she repeated. With those tiny details, $15 million vanished. With those tiny details, hospital beds were never delivered. With those tiny details, thousands of doses of chemotherapy were never purchased. Don't tell the parents of dying children that these details mean nothing. The chamber erupted. Senators slammed their fists on the table, their voices rising together in fury. From the gallery came chants of shame, shame. Reporters shouted over one another, pushing microphones toward the witnesses, their headlines already flashing across the nation. $15 million phantom contract exposed, fake costs, fake staff, fake event. Families watching at home sat in stunned silence, the truth raw and undeniable. In that moment, the facade cracked wide open, and the contract stood revealed for what it was, a weapon of theft disguised as paperwork. The chamber was still trembling from the exposure of the phantom contract when Melania suddenly leaned forward, her voice sharp and defiant. "This is nothing but a political conspiracy," she declared, her accent cutting through the chaos. "Every single piece of so-called evidence you have seen has been fabricated." The words were meant to reclaim control, to flip the spotlight back on Jasmine, but the air in the room felt heavy with disbelief. Cameras zoomed in on her face, catching the tension in her eyes as she tried to sound unshaken. Her attorney, a tall man in a navy suit, stepped up quickly with a stack of papers. "Here is the corrected report," he announced. He laid it down as if it were the final word, the lifeline that would pull Melania from the fire. On the surface, it looked polished, clean charts, adjusted numbers, official letterheads. But Jasmine had been waiting. She leaned over the document, scanning the pages with sharp precision. It took her only seconds to find the cracks. She lifted her head, her voice steady but laced with biting mockery. "The font doesn't even match the committee's standard reports," she said. "And this date, March 14th, 2025, how could a report filed in March list changes from February when the system wasn't even updated until April?" Gasps shot across the chamber. Jasmine tapped the page hard. "This isn't a correction. This is a cover-up." The audience erupted, laughter and outrage mixing into a roar. Melania's smirk faded, her cheeks tightening as her attorney shuffled nervously beside her. Then Jasmine delivered the blow that landed like a slap. She raised her hand and said loud enough for every camera to capture, "You can change a dress overnight, madam, but you cannot change the fingerprints of a computer." The line sliced through the air. The hearing chamber exploded in laughter and applause. Senators banged on their desks, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Melania, for the first time, looked rattled, her eyes darting between the cameras and her crumbling defense. As the noise slowly subsided, the chairman called for the next witnesses. Two figures stepped forward from the crowd. The first was Edward Mason, a philanthropist who had bid $1 million on a luxury art piece during the gala. His voice trembled with anger. "I paid every cent," he said, lifting his receipt for all to see. "But not $1 reached the children it was promised to help." His words sent a chill through the room. The second was Dr. Angela Ruiz, director of St. Jude's Children's Cancer Hospital. She gripped the microphone, her expression grave. "We were told millions were raised for pediatric cancer treatment," she said firmly. "We have not received a single penny, not one." The chamber went silent for a long, searing moment. The philanthropist's proof, the hospital director's testimony, and Jasmine's merciless dismantling of the false report merged into one crushing truth. Melania's claim of a political conspiracy now looked like nothing more than smoke. The audience leaned forward spellbound as the realization spread: the money was gone, the cover-up exposed, and the voices of the betrayed were echoing in every corner of America. The testimony inside Congress spilled into the streets within hours, and the media wasted no time. Every network broke into live coverage, their headlines flashing in bold red. $18 million for cancer children vanishes, direct links to Melania's office. Anchors repeated the line over and over, their voices laced with disbelief. Newspapers rushed out special editions, front pages plastered with Jasmine Crockett's image holding up the damning documents. For millions of Americans, the story wasn't just news anymore. It was a wound ripped open on live television. By evening, television screens across the country filled with parents of the children who were supposed to be saved by that money. On CNN, a mother clutched a photograph of her son, her voice breaking. "That money could have bought his medicine. It could have given us more months, maybe more years. But my boy is gone." And while we buried him, they drank champagne. Her words silenced the studio, the anchor holding back tears. On another network, a father's voice cracked as he said, "We were told help was coming. Instead, our children were betrayed." The images spread quickly across the nation. Millions shared the videos of grieving parents, their heartbreak turning into a nationwide cry of rage. Outside hospitals, crowds gathered with candles and hand-painted signs that read, "Where's the money and you stole their hope?" The nation had seen corruption before, But never like this, never with faces so young, so fragile at the center. People spoke of betrayal in the rawest terms, their anger not just political, but deeply personal. Commentators on primetime shows drew comparisons to Watergate, but with a chilling twist. Watergate was about power. One anchor set his tone grave. This is about life and death. This is about children robbed of their only chance. The words reverberated through living rooms across America. Editorials followed one headline screaming, "Worse than Watergate, the betrayal of America's sickest children." Analysts and historians shook their heads on live panels calling it the most morally devastating scandal in modern U.S. history. As the night deepened, the anger only grew. In New York, Chicago, Dallas, and Los Angeles, spontaneous protests erupted outside government buildings. Parents held up empty pill bottles as symbols of what those millions could have bought. Nurses in pediatric cancer wards joined their scrubs stained with exhaustion, chanting with the crowd. Not politics, lives, they shouted in unison. Every chant, every candle, every tear added to the storm crashing over Melania's name. The scandal had leapt beyond the walls of Congress. It had become a national reckoning, a raw, searing wound exposed for all to see. And in the eyes of the public, there was no defense strong enough, no excuse clever enough to erase the image of parents mourning while millions were siphoned away into luxury. America had seen scandals before, but this one felt different. It felt personal. By morning, that feeling spilled into the streets. Outside children's hospitals in dozens of cities from Seattle to Miami, crowds formed in long, quiet lines, candles cupped in trembling hands, coats zipped against the wind. Parents, nurses, and teachers stood shoulder to shoulder as the sun went down holding cardboard signs that read, "Return the money to the children." The glow of 1,000 tiny flames lit glass walls, ambulance bays, and children's murals, and the silence felt heavier than sirens. A mother placed a teddy bear on the steps and whispered, "This was supposed to help him." A nurse lifted her candle higher and said, "No speeches, just light." From Boston to Phoenix, the vigil spread like a tide the police did not try to stop. The cameras followed the vigils into living rooms, and the country stayed up late. On every late-night program, hosts dropped the jokes and went cold. Their chyrons named the moment in plain language, the betrayal of children with cancer. A montage ran of Jasmine's documents, the missing millions, the parents' tears. Then came a panel of doctors, ethicists, and former prosecutors. One anchor looked straight into the lens and said, "If the richest rooms in America cannot keep their hands off money meant for sick children, then nothing is sacred." Producers rolled the clip again in slow motion, letting every number burn into the screen and every sob settle into the room. Phone lines lit up until producers begged callers to hold. The next day, the demand took shape. People called their representatives until switchboards jammed and inboxes overflowed. At courthouse steps and town squares, speakers rose with a single request: Congress must create a separate Child First Fund run by independent trustees immune from party control. Volunteers circulated clipboards for a petition that read, "Build a wall between politics and sick children." Community leaders sketched safeguards anyone could understand: every dollar logged in a public ledger, monthly audits by outside firms, and a hard cap on overhead that no one could raise. A pastor told the crowd, "We are not asking for miracles. We are asking for receipts." The chant that followed rolled down main streets like thunder. Return the money to the children. By week's end, the outrage had crossed borders. Global child health organizations issued statements of condemnation, calling the scandal a stain on American history. Directors of pediatric foundations in Europe and Asia appeared on morning shows urging guarantees before any future partnerships and warning of paused grants. Philanthropists abroad warned that trust once broken is hard to rebuild and that donors will walk unless reforms are real in public. A former ambassador said on air, "America leads by example. The world just saw an example of what not to do." Editorials in foreign papers echoed the same demand: ring fence every charitable dollar and keep politicians away from the vault. From the hospital steps to the global stage, the message was one and the same: return what was taken and protect the children forever. The candlelight vigils and angry chants outside hospitals forced lawmakers to act. Within days, the Speaker of the House stepped before cameras in the Capitol Rotunda and announced the creation of a new committee with a name that sent shivers through Washington, the inaugural fund corruption inquiry. The words echoed down marble halls, a declaration that this was no longer a scandal contained to headlines. It was now an official investigation of Congress with subpoenas ready to fly and testimony demanded under oath. Members of the committee promised no one will be spared from questioning, not donors, not staff, not even the First Lady herself. Inside the Republican Party, the fracture widened for the world to see. The far-right bloc circled wagons in silence, refusing to criticize Melania directly, their spokesman offering bland statements about respecting due process. But the moderate Republicans, many of them already wary of the Trump brand's shadow broke ranks. Senator Collins stepped onto the Senate floor and declared, "If Mrs. Trump has nothing to hide, she should sit before this body and answer questions again under oath." Reporters swarmed her office as she left their microphones, chasing her every step. The split played across television screens, exposing fault lines that had long been papered over. The Democrats, sensing the momentum, moved fast and without hesitation. House leaders unveiled draft legislation with a blunt title, the Children's Fund Transparency Act. In plain terms, it required every nonprofit or inaugural fund to post donations and spending in real time with penalties stiff enough to scare off even the most seasoned political operator. On the House floor, Representative Jasmine Crockett delivered the pitch, "Never again will millions vanish in the name of sick children. From this day forward, every dollar must have a name, a date, and a destination." Applause thundered through the Democratic side while the Republican benches sat in silence, cameras capturing every grimace and whisper. Election season turned into a storm. Campaign ads ran back-to-back, each one darker than the last. Attack ads showed side-by-side images, Melania in diamonds at the auction gala, and empty children's hospital wards begging for funding. Narrators intoned, "She took their hope. Who will fight for yours?" Town hall meetings exploded with fury as voters demanded answers from candidates. In swing districts, parents stood up and asked bluntly, "Where were you when they stole from our children?" Candidates fumbled for words, their careers teetering on the edge of outrage that no pollster could spin away. By the height of summer, the scandal was no longer just a headline or a hearing. It was the beating heart of the election. Pollsters reported spikes in turnout, intent among seniors and parents alike, both groups furious and mobilized. Editorial boards called it the defining moral issue of our time, and even seasoned operatives whispered that no campaign could survive without taking a stance. What began as whispers in a ballroom had erupted into a national reckoning, one that promised to shape the destiny of Congress, the presidency, and the trust of the American people for years to come. The committee room had been shaken for hours by testimony, but Jasmine Crockett knew her final words would decide how history remembered this day. She stood tall, the cameras tight on her face, every senator and reporter leaning forward. Her voice, clear and unshaken, carried through the chamber like a drumbeat. $18 million is not dead numbers on a page, she began, each word deliberate. It is medicine, it is hospital beds, it is the breath of hundreds of children fighting cancer. The silence in the hall was suffocating. No one dared shift in their seat. Jasmine let the words hang before striking harder. She held up a photograph of a crowded children's ward, two children sharing one bed, machines beeping in the background. Then she set down an image from the gala night, glittering gowns, champagne glasses raised high, a sea of diamonds under crystal chandeliers. And someone, she said, her tone rising like thunder, took that 18 million and traded it for evening gowns and champagne flutes. The images burned into the screen, raw and undeniable. Staffers dimmed the lights and the main monitor split in two. On the left side, a pediatric hospital wing, chipped paint nurses rushing families clutching their children as they waited for medicine that never came. On the right side, the lavish ballroom of 2025 gold-trimmed tables, bottles of Dom Perignon stacked in pyramids, Melania Trump captured mid-laugh under a glittering chandelier. The contrast seared into the eyes of everyone present, a wound that no speech could bandage. Senators dropped their gaze, the weight of shame thick in the air. The reaction outside the walls was immediate. Reporters in the press gallery clutched their earpieces as producers barked, "Get this on screen now, split screen, push it live." Across America, living rooms filled with the image. Sick children gasping for breath, beside politicians toasting with champagne. Anchors' voices shook as they read Jasmine's words aloud. $18 million is not dead numbers. One repeated it is the breath of children. A mother watching in Detroit whispered, "She's right," and clutched her daughter's hand tighter. A father in Dallas sitting beside a hospital bed wiped his eyes in silence. Jasmine straightened the papers on her desk, but she was not finished. She raised her voice one final time, cutting through the roar of cameras. Financial transparency is not paperwork. It is not bureaucracy. It is the foundation of national morality. She pointed at the senators seated before her finger trembling with conviction. If we cannot keep money safe for dying children, then what moral ground do we stand on as a nation? What remains of our soul? Her words crashed through the room like a hammer against stone, leaving even her opponents without a shield. Melania sat frozen, her eyes darting to the screen, then down to her folded hands. The jewelry on her wrist glittered under the harsh lights, a cruel echo of the images behind her. Jasmine did not spare her. Stealing from children with cancer, she declared, her voice trembling now with rage, is not just a crime under the law. It is a crime against humanity itself. Her words broke like glass, each syllable sharper than the last. Even members of the opposing party sat stiff, unable to defend what had just been laid bare. The gallery broke into a low rumble, but Jasmine raised her hand, silencing the noise. She leaned into the microphone, her voice steady, her eyes unblinking. If justice does not stand with the children, she asked, her tone deep and resonant, then who is it for? If justice cannot protect the weakest, the sickest, the smallest among us, then what does the word even mean? Her final question cut like a blade, sinking deep into the conscience of the nation. Across the country, screens flickered as the question echoed. In kitchens, in hospital waiting rooms, in bars, and union halls, Americans repeated it aloud. If justice does not stand with the children, then who is it for? The words became a cry, a chant, a headline that no editor dared soften. Senators shifted uncomfortably, reporters scribbled furiously, and families watching knew they had just witnessed history. Jasmine Crockett's voice had pierced through politics, through scandal, through excuses, and landed where it mattered most, the heart. The chairman's gavel struck echoing like a cannon, but no one moved. The hearing had ended, but the nation understood nothing would be the same after that question. Thank you for watching until this moment, and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.